my advice to a founder who's going through what is truly a roller coaster and is going to be so emotionally draining is just when it's high and you think it's amazing, celebrate it, but just know. Taper it.
Yeah.
And when you're low and it's like, I mean, you felt it. Like when you feel that pressure and that stress,
days.
Dark.
Like there's dark days.
When you feel that, you have to just be like, hold on, there's a light.
Yeah.
I don't know when, but just take a breath and we're going to get through it.
Welcome back to Case Studies. This has been one that we've been talking about doing this for a long time. Obviously, the Divvy story is like one of my favorite stories of Utah tech and growth of all time. Like
I love it.
It's one of like
It's one of my favorites.
But it's fascinating to me how much talent you guys were able to attract in such a short amount of time. And then also to like focus it on a task at hand and just go get the market. And then obviously the outcome was, fantastic for everybody. I did one of these with Sterling.
Yeah,
and
I saw it.
And it was so fun to kind of hear his perspective of not being a founder, but being early and being a part of like that performance culture. And so very interested to kind of get your take on the entire experience. And then also, I think me and you share a lot of commonalities in the way that we see legacy and the way that we see giving and the way that we see contribution and just kind of what it's all about. And so I want to dig into kind of the post Divvy, 2.0/3.0 and kind of where you're kind of giving your life. And so anyway, really excited to chat. So I mean, let's go back to the very beginning because I know like you've done a lot of things outside of this one thing, but talk to me about growing up. What was home like growing up?
So I grew up in Seattle, specifically Redmond, and Redmond was a cow town before Microsoft. So I was born in 1984. Microsoft was basically started around the same time I was born. And you growing up in that area and then watching Microsoft and like in the 90s, I mean, you don't understand the growth. I mean, the world's largest company started in my small little town.
So I did this, I listened to this, I think it's Acquired podcast on Microsoft. And I was fascinated with they went deep on the Microsoft story. And I know that like you're so intimately tied, with your dad and.
Yeah. So my dad never worked for Microsoft, but it felt like everyone else did in our town. And, my neighbor was, he was like a developer on the Magic School Bus, like little CD-ROM thing that they had. And he made, tons everyone was just making money. But it was cool to watch, them scale because they built a product that the world wanted. It's the ultimate, the personal computer is the ultimate product market fit test on the planet. And to watch, like Redmond go from a cow town to, literally, which I think now is hundreds of Microsoft buildings. It's kind of, so then, that was growing up. And so when I came to Utah, I kind of saw a lot of these early vibes of what Redmond was like.
Yeah.
And people, from my experience, they don't realize how much room to grow we still have.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to be on the early stages of that.
But talk to me about that growing up. Like parents were in that scene.
Yeah. So actually my family moved to Seattle in the 50s because my great grandpa was a grocery store guy. So he built like Fred Meyer, Safeway, like when those were all starting was when he was working. It's like the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. He went up to Seattle and started a company called Pay and Save.
Okay.
And Ernst and, Lamont. So he's a big entrepreneur into the retail scene.
This is grandpa.
My great-grandpa.
Okay, great-grandpa.
And my grandpa took it over from him and, stuff like Shucks, what was called Price Savers, which was pre-Costco. So they did a bunch of entrepreneurship stuff. So I grew up in Seattle from a family that was like kind of born and raised to be entrepreneurs.
So talk to me about that because I'm always so interested to see, that it's kind of the nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
And the environment that you grow up with and how that like affects 100%. The way that you see the world.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like having grandpa and great grandpa and that were just entrepreneurs that when they, talked about business, they talked about.
So my great grandpa worked for Safeway.
Okay.
He was an executive. This is so long ago, like during the Depression. Okay. he worked so hard that he had a mental breakdown twice. And the first time he had a mental breakdown, he disappeared for 6 months. Safeway didn't know he had disappeared, and he hired someone else to do his stuff. But he and his wife literally left their children, and he like disappeared, had to like reset, came back, still did great. A couple years later, it was like he dropped back out, took his kids with him this time. For a year, he took off, and he came back, and they're like, yeah, well, we've replaced you. You know, this is like 1940, whatever. So he was done with Safeway. And then someone asked him to take over what was called Pay and Save. And so he became this reluctant entrepreneur because someone said, can you operate it? And he's like, all right. So he started operating it, was really good at it. And eventually he bought him out of like bankruptcy because the owners were kind of not good at it. So he's like, well, what if I operated so well, I can use the profits to buy it back? And they're like, great. So he operated himself into becoming an entrepreneur. So then he had these 10 stores. And then he had 12 stores, and he had 15 stores, and 20. And then eventually my grandpa, got old enough and is like, hey, Dad, I'll help you. And they built it up to 400 stores. Wow. But they were like the accidental entrepreneurs. But then I grew up with that as my like model.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, isn't that what everyone's going to do? Like, why would you work for someone? Like, let's go build something. And my dad was an entrepreneur. And so my brothers started to start companies.
So what did your dad do?
Well, that's going to fast forward into like, ultimately the book and things like that. But my grandpa, who built it to 400 stores, he was really successful. The short of it is that money kind of ended up ruining him. My grandpa. Money ended up being like his only focus. So he destroyed his relationships, and a lot of things that money has the opportunity to do did and kind of took him down. And 3 of his 4 kids died of drugs and alcohol and things like that. So my dad kind of witnessed all this downfall. So my dad actually got into wealth management because he's like, I don't want to see money ruin people like it did my dad.
Yeah.
And so he started his own wealth management firm, and it's been going for about 35, 40 years. My brothers now run it, so they're entrepreneurs in their own right.
And it's fascinating. Timing matters so much. You think about starting a wealth management firm where there was that boom of commerce and boom of, you know what I mean? The world was just exploding.
Yeah.
And kind of a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah, totally, right? And that's the thing. It's not like my dad, for example, was super successful because he's some genius. He happened to be in Redmond, like a place where a lot of wealth was being created, and so he served a lot of Microsoft people. And when you have it, like we're beneficiaries of the Utah market, right?
Yeah.
Like the talent that's here, the energy that's here, the money that's here. It's a rises tide raises all ships. It's exactly that same thing.
So you had like these amazing models, grow up in Redmond, high school. When did the transition happen to Utah?
So I came to school here. I went to BYU. Went back to Seattle after I graduated. Was there for around 10 years, and then I had this opportunity.
And you did what in Seattle when you went back?
I did a lot.
Okay, so give me
nothing nothing that great or sexy. So I was just telling this story actually on the way here. The day I graduated BYU, I had this job offer with a sports consulting firm in Oregon, and I mean that's, if you know me, like sports and consulting, I'm like that's it. I was super psyched. Like I literally graduated. I walked. And then I got a phone call, and they said, actually, one of the partners is going into politics, and I'm kind of going to, I'm going to stop. So job's gone. And I'm like, what? Like, I was like, I just graduated.
And you were so excited about it.
So excited about it. So I ended up, obviously that job wasn't there. Went to Seattle because I really didn't know what else to do. And I had a local job, and that was a good example of, I'm like, well, I'm not just going to stay in this job because it's paying me. Like, I'm going to go find my full-time job. So I went up to Seattle because I had a network there. Started just talking to as many people as I could. Ended up doing Microsoft consulting with a friend of mine that was, my older brother's friend. So I was doing presentations and building decks for Microsoft. Then I ended up selling TV ads at Cairo, which was a CBS like local station.
Yeah.
Did that for a couple of years. And I remember walking into my boss, and her name was Carol, great lady. And I go, you know what, Carol, this has been great, but I'm out. And she's like, I've been waiting for you to come in and tell me this. I'm surprised it took you so long.
She just knew you were
and she's
bigger
like,
than that role.
No, she just is like, why? And I'm like, I just know that this isn't it. I said, you guys pay me well, you treat me right, but this isn't where I want to be for 20 years. And the biggest thing I felt was TV was not innovating at all, and there was no building. You were just kind of selling. You weren't like creating anything. Yeah. And so for me, I was like, all right, Carol, I said, I'm going to leave. And I remember I told my wife, Megan, I said, I'm quitting. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know.
You were just
I
done.
had no clue. I just know
done.
that this isn't it, which, like my mother-in-law and I'm sure my parents and other people are like, what are you doing? But I was like, I can't do it. So that moved me into, I ended up joining an action sports company called Lucky Scooter. You were like, yeah, what is that? And think skateboarding, but they have the little razors that you see them in a skate park.
Yep.
So we were like the U.S.'s biggest brand. And the owner got sick, so I ended up jumping in for him and kind of ran Lucky Scooter for 2 years. And
because you're kind of like fanatical about sports, like you love it.
I love it. Yeah, I
mean,
love
like,
the competition. I love the drama of it.
Like pickleball. Talk to me about pickleball. Like you hold some records.
See, that's why we talk to Casey. He just feeds you the good stuff. Yeah. So you're obviously alluding to my buddy and I. This is like again a few years ago, out of sheer boredom, we were like, what should we do? Let's do something. And we decided to break the world record for pickleball. So
like
we ended up
Guinness Book of World
Guinness
Records,
Book of World Records for the longest pickleball game, and we played for 24 hours and 13 minutes.
That's amazing. But this is all like here lists like these themes: action sports, sports consulting. Like it's always just kind of been a part of you, right?
Yeah, and I played sports growing up, and I will just say I attempted to play in college. I won't go further than that. But I love sports because it's challenging. It takes work, the teamwork, the camaraderie. It's always just been a part of me. But action sports, what was fun about that is we were like this lowly scooter, sport and company.
Yeah,
and we were trying to break into the X Games. Right. So we were trying to do whatever we could to get their attention, to bring on more people. And it's actually quite popular in Europe and in Australia. And so we were trying to make it bigger here in the US. And we grew and we had moderate success. It was never that special. But the amount I learned in that 2 years at Lucky Scooter, traveling to China, traveling across Europe, building distributors, going to competitions, trying to recruit these 14-year-old scooter riders and manage, these kids. And I look back at that time, like I made zero money. I loved it.
Isn't it fascinating looking back that you're like, this wasn't the financial outcome that I was striving for, but it laid the foundation for like everything else. Like it's so interesting. Like,
can I tell you the number? I'm going to tell you the numbers just on this one because it's good. So I remember I started at Lucky Scooter. They paid me $60,000 a year, and I was like, I don't care what you pay me. The opportunity to run the company and do. I'm like, I'm in. So I went in. It was not about the money. I was like, I'm going to go learn. I'm going to work with these two people and let's do it. They gave me, I want to say 5% of the company. Like a little vesting, but 5% of the company. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, we've made it. Like, we're going to sell this thing for $40 million and I'm going to make a couple $1 million, like basically cash the check. Done. I remember telling her that. My wife was like, really? She was like,
you're certain.
So certain of it. And I worked, my schedule at Lucky Scooter was I left the house at 7 a.m. I'd get home at 7 p.m. I'd eat dinner, see my kids for a little bit. And then from 9 to like 2 a.m., I worked again. I worked all the time, 15 hours a day, all the time. I would go for 2 weeks at a time to China.
For how long?
2 years.
Okay. So like I want.
Well, hold on. I got to give you the final answer because before we get off of it, I told my wife we were going to make the money. The end of the day, busted my butt for 2 years. We even had some moderate success. Would you like to guess what I sold it for? Because it was not what I thought. It ended up being, I think I got $10,000 check for my shares, and I was like, I'll take it. Like it's over. So,
no, but I wanted to like drill into this because like your world right now, you do a lot of seed investing, early stage investing. Obviously, you have like as credible, experience in that as anybody in the Valley. But what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur that's starting that hustle and starting that grind based off of kind of your personal experience?
Yeah. So there's two things that come to mind, right? Because there's a lot of advice, like what was the advice to how to have success, but I'm going to talk about more how to like handle the process of of going after it, right? So I would say two things. One, this is like the one thing I would say at Divvy, I think pretty consistently, which was things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem. And, you know, at Divvy, for example, there were days, and even at Lucky, and all the stories, and you have the same stories, but there were days at Divvy where I'd come home and I'd tell Megan the same thing. I'm like, Megan,
it's on.
We have freaking nailed it.
Yeah.
You know, we're $1 billion+ company. We've got it. The next day I'd come home and I'd be like, it's over. Like, I don't know how we're going to get through this thing that's going on. Like, it's probably over. And the highs are so high and the lows are so low, it can be really exhausting and really emotionally draining. So like my advice to a founder who's going through what is truly a roller coaster and is going to be so emotionally draining is just when it's high and you think it's amazing, celebrate it, but just taper it.
Yeah.
And when you're low and it's like, I mean, you felt it. Like when you feel that pressure and that stress,
there's dark days.
When you feel that, you have to just be like, hold on, there's a light. Yeah. I don't know when, but just take a breath and we're going to get through it. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing, you know, when I talk about the long hours at Lucky and Divvy also had its own hours, I would say like, go ahead, like work the hours. It's going to take energy and time, but make sure that you have some discipline for you and for like your family, for example. So for me, getting home by 6 and not working till like 9 was this just, I need to see my wife. I need to see my kids. Like I have to block that time off to
do it,
to do the family stuff. Yeah. Otherwise you're obviously going to ruin the thing that really matters. But for me, it also allowed me to take a break and take a breath. And then I could get back on my computer when the kid was asleep.
Yeah.
And, for me, that was super helpful. And I also I got into golf when I came to Utah because it was like, all right, I could go play at Fox Hollow at 6 a.m. for 9 holes before work. All right, I can wake up. It doesn't disrupt from work and it doesn't disrupt my family, but it's a little me time.
Yeah.
And that like 9 holes is like
therapy.
I don't want to say it changed my life. That's a little too much, but it was therapy. It's like, okay, that really set the day and it was like something I could do and I enjoyed and it was really, really great.
So I'm thinking about my personal experience and I'm thinking about the Viven experience. And I remember Todd and Alex, they went to Japan and they met with, Matza, son or
Masa son.
Yeah, and this was when peak vision fund. They had all the money and they're writing the checks to to what's that one? WeWork and like all like big checks. And they sit down with Matza and he's like, I'm in. And like agreed to a number. It was like $8.5 billion. Mm-hmm. And I remember all of us like, it's done. It's over. Like we did like this is it. You know, and I remember there was other points where it was like literally we're like 2 weeks or a month off of like tripping a credit covenant and like losing our business.
Yeah.
And the stress and like the peaks and the valleys. And I think it's like so underappreciated. I remember talking to David Nealman and asking him that same question. And his answer surprised me because he just said, it's not for everybody. And I was waiting for him to hear like this, like,
anyone can do it. Yeah.
And he just said, it's not like if you don't go to bed thinking about it and you don't wake up thinking about it and you're fully committed and you're passionate and you're like committed to the whole process, it's not a great process. Like it's, it'll chew you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience with it is that like, just like you're saying, like it's never as good as you think it is.
Well, I mean, because, Sandlot, you guys have had a lot of success, which seems to be like very quick and very big. And it's like, oh man. So from the outside, I know people are saying, oh man, they've had no adversity. It's been like they just killed it from day one. And I don't know all your stories, but I would say, no, I bet if I sat down with Casey and said, hey, has it always been easy? Like, did every answer come quickly? It's like, no, it's not how it works.
I think it's that universal answer to every entrepreneur that like the highs are really high and they're fun. And the lows are like really tough. You know what I mean? And the stress and it's kind of one of those things where it's interesting that those are the 2 pieces of advice are 1, create balance. And then 2, just stay in the game. Like have faith. Yeah. Keep looking forward. It's going to be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like it really, you have to want it. Like you have to really, not people say you have to love it. And I do think that, but it's like to do the entrepreneurship journey for what can be a long time. I think, you know, Divvy was was shorter in terms of how long we did it, but the speed and the pace of every month was pretty intense.
The intensity was a lot
different.
of years in a couple of years.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's accurate. And you've got to really be committed to it because, again, it just takes a lot.
Yeah. So you come, you try all these different things, get all this unique experience. How did Divvy come about? How the relationship with Blake? How did kind of all that?
So Blake and I met in fourth grade playing paintball, like all fourth graders do. And no, we just met in Redmond. His dad was at Microsoft. We lived about a mile from each other, and we were same age. We're actually both twins, born in the same city in the same month.
That's crazy.
His twin brother's name is Alex. Obviously, that's my name. And so we hung out in fourth grade, and we were always kind of friends, right? Wouldn't say we were best friends. I was actually closer to his brother Alex, but we knew each other and were close. After that lucky scooter, I ended up working for basically a dev shop where we built apps for other people, and I did that for a couple of years. So I started to become a scrum master and started to figure out how to build technology. And we were building it for other people, and I was like, okay, hold on, this is the process, this is the cost, this is the pace. And I started to have the itch to do it myself.
How do you even get into that?
When I left Lucky, one of my other good friends was running a company like that. And he said, hey, I need help with the go-to-market.
Are you going to coding camp? Are you like...
No, it was really, so he said, hey, I need help with sales, because I've always been on the sales and marketing side, revenue side. And he's like, hey, we've built it. I think at the time they built it to like 5 million. He's like, but we need help to really do this thing.
Yeah.
And so I went over with him, and so I was installing, like they'd never done CRMs, they'd never done marketing, they'd never done any go-to-market motion. So I'm doing that. But then you're sitting next to all the developers and project managers and designers.
The language.
So you start learning the language, you start seeing the process, you start, talking to clients on what they want, and you're trying to relay that back to the teams, and you just start to pick it up.
Yeah.
But then you start getting trained and you certified, and it's like, okay, got a little bit further into my quote unquote knowledge. I would never be able to actually build the thing myself, but you get a sense of
you can speak the
how
language.
Do you manage it.
Yeah.
So I'm in Seattle, and we had the chance to go wherever we wanted at the time. We were working remote, doing a dev shop, helping to build a go-to-market across the U.S., and we had the chance to live wherever we wanted. And I told my wife, who's from Utah, she's from this area, she didn't want to come back. She's like, I love Seattle. My friends are in Seattle, and I don't want to go back to like where my high school was basically like her feeling. And I'm like, but I want to go to Utah because their tech scene is like, I'll say it was so approachable. It's like, we can start a tech company there.
Yeah.
It's cheaper talent, it's cheaper rent. And so I said, will you live by your sister so we can move to Utah, and then I can travel, I can work hard, and you're not going to like hate me, because you have your sister. So we moved to Utah with that in mind. So I'm still doing dev shop stuff, but with that, I want to get involved in tech. And 3 months after I moved here, Blake calls me. It's like,
this is what year?
This is 2016, February of 2016. Blake calls me and says, I got an idea. Like, I want to build an app. I'd love to run it by you. So I'm great. I haven't really seen him in a while, but, we obviously had kept touch. And he comes to my house. We go downstairs. We sit on these, like, comfortable but ugly blue couches. And that was the first time that, I had talked to him about Divvy, and we sat down, and he kind of told me his idea. And it was the simplest idea of divvying up a credit line. That's where the name Divvy came from. I just one credit line, but divvied out. And we spent probably an hour and a half or so going through it. And I can honestly tell you from that meeting, I was like, we're doing this. Like this.
Just like Lucky Scooter.
Well, Lucky, yes. I had very similar confidence in Lucky, so I've been wrong before. But yeah, my thing about Blake is, you talked about intensity and like what it takes. And Blake, I told my wife that day, I'm like, here's the idea, and I tell people all the time, when you tell your wife an idea, it's irrelevant what they say, your partner or spouse, because they're just too involved. So they're either going to say it's too risky, don't do it, or you're the best, baby, you can do it. Like both of those are just irrelevant feedback loops. But I was like, Megan, I'm going to do this. And she's like, you sure? And I'm like, I know if I get in Blake's boat and we start rowing together, as long as I'm in that boat.
Dude, what a compliment that you can give to somebody, though. Like, I think about, like, what's the most sincere compliment that I could give to somebody? And it's probably like,
oh, that's a good question.
Whatever you're doing, I'm on board because I know you're going to succeed. I don't know if you could give, like, a more sincere compliment to somebody. That's super special.
Yeah, I mean, and Blake, he just had he knew, and I helped create the vision, but Blake just had this intensity and this knowledge of where he wanted to go and what it wanted to be.
I mean, he's a force.
He's a force,
100%. He's a force.
He's a force. That's a good way to describe Blake. And you can say, the way you do it or not the way you do it, it's irrelevant. He's a force, and he knew where he wanted to go. And I'm like, let's jump in this boat.
Yeah. So start Divvy.
Yeah.
And from 2016 to 2021, 2022, I mean, it was a rocket ship.
Yeah. So the right pacing is the first 6 months, Blake and I were going back and forth. We're texting. We're like, okay, we're trying to evolve the idea a little bit. There's things we didn't know that we started to learn, and that helped, form the business.
Yeah.
But we're actually still just designing it, just kind of saying and Blake was paying developers out of his own pocket to say, is this possible? Can we actually do the thing that we're talking about doing?
Yeah.
Where the aha came for Blake and I, where it was more than just cemented of oh, this is cool, but no, we're going to do it, is we went on this trip to US Bank. Minnesota, downtown, US Bank's one of the biggest.
And how do you land that meeting?
So Blake's local branch manager managed his pizza studio money and his personal money, and he's telling them, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great. So they told some regional guy, and then Blake, again, Blake's a force, right? So Blake's like, no, get me in front of the right person. So we get in front of this guy, Jake, and then he's like, you should come to Minnesota. So we kind of know we're coming to Minnesota. We know we're going to meet with some, quote, important people, but we don't really have a sense of who it is. So we get there, and I think I'm probably wearing this, jeans, a T-shirt. We don't have a product. I want to be very clear about this. We just have this envision clickable prototype that we're just going to tell them we're going to build this. We go up to it's their main building, whatever floor it was, top floor-ish, and it's their main conference room. And they bring in some senior people. I think there was a member from the exec team of US Bank, but there was, the senior people in the room. So there's probably 7 US Bank people and just Blake and I. And another thing that's fun about Blake is he is not scared to say his opinion. And we basically went in there and said, this is the future of where banking is going. And if you don't do it, we're gonna take you down. We're telling them we don't have a product. These guys, this is a multi-billion-dollar business. They're in suits. They're like, guys, we've made it. And we're in there with no product, just the highest ego you've ever seen, being we are going to build this. And it's going to change the game, and we're going to take your market share unless you build it with us.
Fortune really does favor the bold, doesn't
it? I look back on it, and it was one of those out-of-body experiences. We felt it the whole time we were going. We have the room.
And obviously they felt it.
Oh, no. You know what I mean? We had the room. You can tell the questions they're asking, the way they're sitting. They only have so much time, but they push that time on.
Extending it, yeah.
So it's happening. We're really doing it. And we leave the meeting, it's like a Dumb and Dumber scene where you kind of leave and you look at each other, you're like, don't say anything. Let's get off campus. We get to we had food, and we're just did that just happen? We're did you see their faces? They know this is the future, and they know they can't build it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ignorance in that statement, right? Small nothing versus a big Goliath. But we just, at that moment, I think Blake and I were it's our duty to do this.
Yeah.
We have to do this. I think that's when we officially quit our jobs.
You felt kind of called to it.
That's when the calling began. Of this is better than just an idea. Now it is we're doing this thing.
So that was the point where you guys cut the, you burned the
boat. Because he had Pizza Studio. I had my company, and that was when we said, So we raised some money, and we quit our jobs, and it was game time. So, and that was September. Really, August of that year of 16 is when we started, and then
Well, and we could literally spend the next 2 hours talking about the growth and hiring, all the steps, the exit. What I want to talk to you about is, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. What happened after? So I'll give you kind of my outside view. We were a small investor in a late round. Company sells 3 or 4 months later to Bill.com. It's a massive outcome. But a lot of changes. Bill's a big company.
Yep.
A lot of my friends who worked there transitioned out. You know, lot of changes.
So I left, this is June of 21. I left the day after we sold.
You were done.
Yeah. Long story, but just like I left, meaning everyone else was like kind of staying on and then eventually started to leave. I was like, all right, I'm going to go. And so that was June. And because I'd been sprinting with Lucky and with all these other, companies prior, it just had been a long time.
Yeah.
And I said to myself that summer, I'm like, I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. No one talk to me about work things. I need to like be with my 4 kids, my wife, and I just needed to like decompress. Like back to what I said about my great grandpa, I just had felt a little overwhelmed, and I'm like, okay, I need to like peel back.
Yeah.
So that summer I did. I truly went on like what I would call a honeymoon stage. It was great. I mean, I just was like, I'm going to play some golf. I'm going to go on some trips, see family, relax, and I really enjoyed it. So that was what happened right after Divvy, and then kind of coming into fall when my kids started going back to school, and the kids are going to school. It's like, what is Dad doing? And I just started to like get restless and
feel
I was like,
lonely a little bit.
I felt lost actually more than lonely.
Yeah.
And when I say lost is because for so long I had this both two things, purpose and identity. My identity was now Divvy, right? Because when you're the co-founder, or when you're something at Viven, people start to talk to you in a certain way or recognize you in a certain way, and there's ego to it, and you can't say you don't like it, but it was gone, right? And now like that wasn't there, and then my purpose of like every day thinking about our baby, which was Divvy, and how are we going to build it and grow it and shape it, and that was gone. So
this is something that I want you to talk to, because I've experienced this. And I think if you haven't experienced it, you would think it's different. So when I got money for the first time, like my first liquidity event, I don't want to say it's hollow, but it's not what I thought it would be.
So can I tell you, we sold secondaries. The first like real check was a secondary.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to hit on a Monday. And we were all getting paid from different groups. It's just the complications of the deal. Everyone else got paid Monday morning. It hit their bank account. A few people got paid. And they were all jacked. They're all excited. They're coming into my office like, oh, did you get it? And I hadn't gotten it. Like my wire instructions were messed up. It was from another group like overseas. There was some logistics. So then they started they're like, oh, everyone else had gotten it. So I didn't get it Monday. So then I'm like starting to get stressed because my buyer could back out or something like that, right? And then I didn't get it Tuesday. And then they started like feeling bad for me, and they like wouldn't talk to me about it. And then it was like Wednesday I didn't get it. And now I'm starting to like what was supposed to be this pinnacle party, like that I could actually finally go like tell my wife and these friends and be like, we did it. High five.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Thursday. And when you say hollow, it was one of those like, I thought this was going to be such a great moment, but this has been so stressful. I've been freaking out all week. And, and I think that's reality, right? People they like to think if I work and I eventually get to that pinnacle and I'm able to get liquidity or whatever it might be, it's like, all right, everything's just sunshine and roses. I can go sit on a beach and do whatever I want, which I get. Yes, that is part of you have the option. What I found is when that came and I was quote unquote sitting on a beach, pretty quickly after that honeymoon stage, I was like, oh, I'm like, I phrased it this way. I would go to bed and I'm like, oh, I didn't earn my sleep today. Because I wasn't building, I wasn't creating, I wasn't doing, and I wasn't fulfilled. And I started being restless. I started going to bed being what is wrong?
I think that phrase of earn my sleep, I think that has like so much substance. The like doing anything good, doing a workout good, serving your fam, like being all in on something allows you to have that pride that I'm contributing,
And do you know what's the measuring stick of that? Like you can say whatever you want and I can say whatever I want, but your soul, like you're in here knows.
You can feel it.
You can feel it.
Yeah, you can 100%.
And I was like going to bed and I could feel it. And I was like, wow, like I haven't felt this in a long time. And it's this weird notion of, wait a minute, I was happier working the hours and building because I had purpose. I had identity. And every night I'd go to bed and be like, I hunted today, whatever you want, whatever your phraseology wants to be. And now that I wasn't, It was very odd. It was a very strange feeling and something I didn't enjoy.
So talk to me about that cycle.
So I said, okay, I'm not ready to work again. So I started doing things. This is when I did the pickleball world record. I did piano with my kids. I had like 2 little girls, and I was like, I'm gonna take piano with them.
Yeah.
And I did a piano recital with all these little 10-year-olds and 8-year-olds, and I was a 40-year-old at the recital. Looked like an idiot, but I was doing piano. I took I'm like embarrassed to admit this, but it's true. I also took like magic sleight, like card trick, like lessons.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But I knew it wasn't anything. So like I was working out, doing those things.
I've heard
and
you say like hobby hill or whatever it is.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
You kind of get lost on this like
so
trying to find something.
So like ultimately I went on this journey of I had climbed, quote unquote, what we phrase, because again, writing the book, Money Mountain. And after Money Mountain, after the peak of Money Mountain, I started on Hobby Hill, right? And I was meandering around Hobby Hill. But the reality is that there is a difference between hiking a mountain and walking around aimlessly on
different.
a hill.
There's less consequence.
Yeah, there's also less fulfillment. You climb one story we tell in the book. Have you heard of Mount Rainier up in Seattle?
Of course.
So I'm from Seattle, obviously. The mountain's like stands on its own. It's incredibly beautiful. And I'd never hiked it. My brothers had hiked it. So I always said, like, I have to hike the mountain. Like, I have to prove to myself, my brothers did it, my dad did it, I have to do it. So, I hiked Mount Rainier after Divvy. And I hate hiking. Like, I want to be clear. I hate practice hiking. I hate real hiking, the whole thing. But, when you start at the bottom of a mountain and you look up, you're like, that is so far up there.
It's intimidating.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't even want to pretend. I don't want to even take a step forward, but you're just like, all right, my friends are doing it. Let's go. And so the story, that we tell in the book is you hike up to base camp. So it's a long hike. You get to base camp, you rest, you wake up at midnight. And at midnight, you start the ascent to the top. And we get there and we're hiking. We've been hiking for about an hour. We get to this like next precipice because we're kind of on a glacier. We're about to go up this steep climb. And my friend, who's our guide, I look at him and I'm like, Josh, are those stars or are those people? Because these things are so far up there. And he's like, those are people with headlamps. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
That's what I'm climbing tonight.
I was just I was like, I'm beat. I can't do it. But you do it and you take step after step after step. And the reward you feel when you get to the top is incredible. So post Divvy, when you don't have that and you're just basically walking around without purpose, without like, there's no ascent to go after, no, summit to climb. It was really like an odd feeling. I didn't like it. I didn't do well. And I started to feel, we'll call it my happiness kind of drop. And it wasn't, I didn't like it.
How'd you reset? Like, how do you, like, what was...
Yeah, I bought an office space and just started going to work. And it was like, well, what are you doing at work? And I'm like, I don't know. But I
just felt like you needed to, like,
yeah, so start. I started writing a second book, which hasn't been published just because it was something I'd taken notes on and started writing that. I started testing different business ideas. I started letting entrepreneurs come talk to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to go and be somewhere from 9 a.m. to 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon. Yeah. And I have to go away and it just reset the cycle of getting on some sort of path to figure out what that was. And it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to really do, probably 6 to 8 months before I finally settled into like, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But the reset was just like, all right, I'm going to literally go to work without a job.
I need some time, but I need to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that principle of starting matters a lot. Like you can't steer a parked car. Like you got to get moving somewhere, even if it's the wrong direction, but you just got to get going.
Well, have you heard the gym analogy? Like I don't love to work out, but it's like, you're not going to show up like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just show up.
Yeah.
The first time, just show up, maybe walk in the treadmill. You don't even need to sweat, but just show up.
Yep.
Because as you start to show up, you say, okay, I'm going to start doing more.
Yeah.
And do more. And I think it's a very similar principle.
So Tony Robbins is like, everybody says, I changed my life, but 100% he changed my life. And there's these pieces that he talks about what you are describing in your book, but he used some really interesting language. He talks about these 6 human needs. And he says all people have 6 human needs. They're universal. And some of them kind of contradict each other a little bit.
Okay.
And you've got significance, love and connection, certainty and uncertainty. And these are kind of the base level needs. And, people get significance from their job. They get significance from social media. They get significance from a lot of different things, but it's a need. All of us crave it, and when you're referencing my identity is Divvy. Like, you got a tremendous amount of significance. When people come into the room, they're, you know, excited to talk to you and using your title and all this stuff. And then the relationships just matter. You know, you think about with your wife or your friends or your family, like when it's good, a lot of stuff can be bad and life's still pretty good. Mm-hmm. And when it's bad, a lot of stuff can be good and it doesn't matter. Yeah. But then you take the certainty of like, I know, you know, things are going to be a certain way and we crave it. Like we like structure, you know, for me, it's church. For me, it's my work. Like there's a lot of habits that I'm like, it gives me a lot of structure, but then uncertainty is equally like as important. It's like we need some variety in our life.
Adventure.
Yeah, an adventure. Yeah. But he talks about these kind of being the base needs, but he talks about the super needs. And he says, this is where you get fulfillment. And it's when you're growing and when you're giving. And and I think about these super needs and I think about my life and when have I been like peak level of fulfillment? And it's been when I'm serving a mission and learning a new language, or when I'm first year door to door and I'm just getting my teeth kicked in, but it's pushing me up this hill and it's challenging and I'm contributing, I'm taking care of my family or building a bit, you know, that's where I feel like this high level of commitment. And I'm hearing this and I'm thinking about that window in your life where a lot of those needs weren't being fulfilled very well. Yeah. Lacking some significance. Even relationships maybe aren't as vibrant as they could, you know, have been at different points. Whether that's money, whether that's whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to go into that,
I'd love to, like, how did that affect, like, your relationship with your wife? Like, you go have this massive event. I think everybody from the outside looking in would be like, you've done it. Like, it's over.
So it's really interesting. We grew up differently. I would say I grew up middle to upper middle class. You know, my parents didn't give me everything, but we had everything we needed and, you know, a fun house, and we were great. Megan grew up here in Utah, you know, single mom. She made like $10 an hour her first job, right? Like, so it was lower income. So basically, life told her if you want something, you have to go work for it. So she's been working since she was like 14 to pay for it. She's a scrapper. Yes. So she grew up with that mentality, which is amazing. So when the money came, we reacted very differently. I was like, oh, let's, you know, do this, which might be like buy a cabin, or let's, you know, give this or do this for siblings. And she was like, I want none of that. She just wanted to keep life exactly as it was, which is like, no, I just want my kids and we're good. And, you know, like, and I wanted change. I wanted to switch things up. And I think you've probably felt it. I want to go buy something. And so I was on this antsy side of that. She was grounded and was like, no, like, let's breathe. Let's not,
let's chill for a bit.
Let's chill. Yeah. Let's not just change immediately. And, what's interesting about it is we had a lot of conversations that first year, and I think it would surprise people. You know, we've been married for 17 years. Our first year marriage was great, but, it was learning a lot about each other that first year. It was probably this year post Divvy was probably the hardest year of our marriage. And people were like, how is that possible? Your money problems are taken away. You can travel on trips. You're building a new house. And I'm like, I don't know all the answers. I'm just telling you the reality. And us going through that, it was like having to reset a new reality. And that was really hard on our marriage. And obviously we worked through it, but it was just different. It threw us for a loop for a little bit. And it was because it was different, right? How do you react to people asking for money?
Of course.
Right? How do you react to certain people that are close to you not being in the same situation, and maybe they're going through struggles? Do you offer? And sometimes, by the way, just even when you offer, it doesn't go the way. It's weird. Yeah. And maybe they don't want you to offer. But maybe some people really expect you to offer and you never offered. Yeah. And there was a handful of situations which are pretty personal. So I don't know if I want to get into any of those exact ones. But
those dynamics are hard.
They're more complicated than people would think.
I'm just, from personal experience, they're really hard. The people that you've been close with for a long time that cross the line because of a change, and it like, those are hard. Like, those are hard things.
And I think, fortunately, we have, like, obviously Megan and I we have a great relationship. Our kids are young, so a lot of things go over their head. we had great friends and like great family. So we were like really fortunate, but even inside of that, there was a lot of these emotional things where like, oh, well, that person's got this issue. Like, should we solve it? Like we can. And sometimes we offered to solve it, and occasionally it was a good experience, and other times it like
blows up in your face.
It wasn't great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great for them or for, it was just like,
yeah.
you know, and so that like there's a lot of nuance to it.
Yeah. It's complicated. I remember I had this random experience where giving is like, you know, Todd Peterson was my mentor growing up, and he's one of the most generous people I've ever met. And so early on, you know, for me, I'm seeing the way that he lives life, and I'm like, I want to model that, you know? And so one of the things he'll do is he'll just kind of micro give. And so I'm on a trip to Houston and have some cash and just looking for an opportunity to serve somebody, and see a lady walking, you know, it's in like a lower income part of Houston. And I just feel like this like desire to like go give her some money. And it's kind of awkward. You know, I'm driving different direction. And anyway, hear it, you know, feel the impression again, pull over, drive over. And I just said, hey, like, I just have this impression that you need to have this. And the lady looks at me so offended, and she's like, I'm on vacation. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that is the biggest fail of like following my heart. And you know what I mean? So it really is like this complicated thing where you want to make the biggest impact. But it's nuanced, and it is complicated, and it's an art. It's not a science. It's absolutely an art.
So can I talk about that art for a second?
Yeah, I love it.
So the book that I ended up writing, because like basically post my experience when I left Divvy, you know, I had these two grandparents as examples, as I mentioned at the beginning, and my grandpa, I say went this way, my great grandpa went this way. What I mean by that is my great grandpa, like 70 years later, we still talk about him. We still like revere him, and it's because of the person he was and the relationships that he maintained and the impact he had on his community. And this, like, I had someone take me to lunch a year ago. I didn't know this person, but they recognized me, you know, in Utah. They're older, and they took me to lunch and basically said, "I want you to know that your great grandpa changed my life when I was 16 in Seattle." And I was like, "What?" He told me the whole story. I mean, this is 60 years later. I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever, right? My grandpa, although an amazing guy and amazing success in business, it would be the opposite, right? He died alone in an old folks' home. 3 of his 4 kids died without really a relationship with their dad, drugs and alcohol, you know, divorces, all the stuff that like you would say money has the chance to take down. It kind of happened. So I'd say he went this way, and you look at all he achieved, and yet you feel really sad for the outcome that he actually had in his life. And so when that happened, I went on this whole kind of journey of like, well, how do I do that? How do I become my great grandpa, not my grandpa? Yeah. And through it, there was this phrase that I kind of clung on to as I started to talk to other people and interview and say, what'd you do? And what was your experience? What have you done right? What have you done wrong? And through these interviews, I heard a lot of stories, and I kind of came up with this analogy. The analogy was, we call it factory for good. And what we mean by that is like, so, you know, your whole life, you know, when you're an adult, you work, you spend your time and your energy to produce money, because money provides shelter and food and all the necessities of life, you know. So that's your factory. Everyone's got their own factory. Casey has a factory, Alex has a factory, and you produce money. But at some point, if you're in a fortunate position, or if you're even striving to get to that position, you might actually achieve that money output. Okay, and it's at that point that you actually need to retool your factory. And that's the process I was going through of good money can no longer be my output. That can't be my sole focus, because that's the takeaway from my grandpa is money just always was his focus, and he just kept making money. And money now needs to be an input, or it needs to be something that helps with your time and energy to produce what? It's like, well, it's no longer money. What is it? And I started to realize like, oh, I think it's good. Like whatever good means to you. Whatever, and I can go through a bunch of examples, but I started to realize you now need to have this new mountain you're climbing, and that mountain needs to be like, what good am I going to bring the world? What is my responsibility to do? Contribution. Yeah, what is my contribution to my family, to my friends, to my community, to the world at large? Because I have the opportunity and means to do it. And so we started calling it Factory for Good, and then it's this whole process of like, all right, well, how do I figure out how to give or where to give or what that looks like and what good looks like to me. And it's been a fun journey, but a fun process that we've been going through.
So what have you learned? Like if it's a whole book, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, if you were to sum it up, like what have you learned when you go talk to the most successful people? Like,
and I want to be very clear on how I'm measuring success. I view success as people that are genuinely happy. And you used the Tony Robbins, they are, what were the super needs?
Yeah, the growing and giving.
Growing and giving.
Yeah.
Those people have real purpose.
Yep.
Every day there's like an intent to their walk.
Yep.
There's thoughts going on in their mind, and like physically they're just like, let's go. We're climbing a mountain, and they know the mountain they're climbing, so they know the direction they're headed.
Yeah.
That one, you can see it. And I'll talk about something I call the happiness audit, but I would say those people are happy. People with purpose are happy. Second thing is, relationships, right? Like we just talked about the importance of relationships, but that was like almost the number one thing I heard just across the board is when you have good, a good marriage or a good, relationship there, or good kids and good friends, and you're able to, nothing else really matters as long as you have that. And then the third thing, so we got into the third like pillar for us, which was legacy. What we realized in this, so like, for example, I think most people would say when you work really hard, what do you want to leave your children? What's the typical answer people say? What do I want to leave my kids?
Yeah, most of the time it's assets or money or it's,
right?
Yeah.
It's assets or money. Okay. And what we learned, which was fascinating, because I would not have thought this, one of the phrases I heard from someone who I admire a ton and I would consider successful, which is like purposeful and happy and the person I would want to emulate. He said, shared assets ruin families. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no. What you think you want to give your children is the wrong thing. It's going to ruin them. Money, a house, land, doesn't matter. Grandma's jewelry.
Yeah.
He's like, at the end of the day, it's a ticking time bomb. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, that's what we're all working towards. And he's like, no. And his point was, you need to pass your values down. They need to know what mom and dad, grandma and grandpa cared about.
Are about.
Yeah. Now, they don't need to know all numbers. But they need to know what you're about, right? Yeah. And so they need to know, what your good is, what you care about, right? And so for Megan and I, it's trying to figure out what are we about? And that's the process of defining what good is. And it's been really fascinating to figure out. By the way, there's no right answer about what you're about. It could be saving, people. It could be giving education. It could be whatever. But you got to be about something. And if you don't know what that is, I think you're really missing out.
No, for sure. I think about, we're right in the middle of this with our kids, saying, how do we not school
How old
them
are your
up?
kids?
15's the oldest, 2 is the youngest. We got 5 kids, kind of that whole range.
And 15, they're 3 years and they're out of the house.
She's in it, and we try to go work through, how do we have our mission statement, our guiding principles, and our value, and sit down and have them participate in it. Charity's, really important to us. But it's interesting because like the genie is out of the bottle. Like my kids grow up different than I grew up. And that's just never going back. We live in a house that's a nice home. Yeah. We fly private. That there's things that we do that are just like they've never known anything different. Yeah. And that's different. Like my family didn't grow up like that. Yep. So there's part of it that's like we have a reality that we live in that just is the reality. How do you also instill, like gratitude and humility and service and we're in it. We're trying to sort it out.
And responsibility. Yeah. Right? Like, so a big thing I've noticed that I saw with people that I would say doing this really well, all the things you just said, but also knowing, hey, well, when you leave the house, here's how we'll help you, but here's what you're responsible on your own, and what career you're going to have, and what life are you going to build? Because you have to build your own factory. You can't just rely on mom and dad.
When you have to be self-reliant, like there's no pride in handouts. Like there really is no pride in, like I share this quote a lot, but the dean of Harvard Business School, talking about the truest form of dignity that you can give to another human being is to teach them to be economically self-reliant. That they actually can create it. And the dignity that brings. You think about the first time that you actually developed a skill that could take care of yourself and expansion that could take care of your family. and the pride that it gives you.
Yeah.
You know, I can do this.
You
I
feel of value because you're actually creating value.
When you talk about earning your sleep, like the dignity that you have going to sleep, knowing that like I did a good job today.
So in one interview, the guy said the reason he doesn't give his kids as much as he could is he's like, don't rob them of the pride of them doing them themselves.
Yeah.
And it's what you're saying. He's like, if you just gave it to them, I mean, they're going to hate it.
We went to this family offices building a legacy course at Harvard.
Okay.
And the entire week is case studies on different ways of doing it, you know, and best practices and how different families have done it. There was a fascinating one. There was this family from Saudi Arabia that, you know, unlimited capital.
Sure. Yep.
And, you know, kids that are going to inherit some and how to give in second and third generation. And they did something that was really fascinating. They had an amount that they were going to give. And it was a 7-figure amount, but it wasn't an 8-figure amount. Like it was a number that would like be a great head start to any kid.
Yeah.
But the way that they gave it was really interesting. You had to graduate college. Until you graduate college, you get nothing. And when you graduate college, you got $100,000. And what they found with most of those generations is that they would screw up that $100,000.
Yeah.
That they'd blow through it. They'd go buy the first things. They'd make the bad investments.
Yep. And
they'd kind of like plow. And there was a select few that made better decisions, that interviewed and didn't do that. But then there was a 5-year gap before they got their next allocation.
Yeah.
And the next one was bigger. It was $500,000, and then 5 years later, it was $1 million. So I think it was $1.6 million total that they had for each grandkid. But what they found in this process was allowing them to go learn on the $100,000 and like make a lot of mistakes with a smaller number, made them way better stewards 5 years later. And it was interesting. I'd never thought of it, but it was a strategy that they put together that they said, you know, we are going to give. Like we have an amount that we're going to give. We're not giving all of it, but we are going to give.
Yeah.
But we're going to give in a way that is staged and sequential, and they've got to go hit mile marks to go earn it. And so again, you know, what you said is there's no right way, but there are best practices.
Oh, there are definitely best practices. Yeah. I think it's like, so we do a thing, you talk about not screwing up your kids. We do a thing, we call it the bank of mom and dad. And what we're talking about here, you're 15-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So I have a 14-year-old. And okay, well, they go to a movie with friends. Am I paying for it or are they paying for it? Simple question, right? And I'll just use our family as an example. Well, my wife's definitely not paying for it because she grew up poor and she's like, you can go earn your own money. I'm always like, sometimes I'll pay for it. Sometimes it's like, you know, fine, I'll split it with you. And then if you ask my daughter, she doesn't know the rules. So the whole point here is like, wait a minute, Megan and I aren't on the same page, and our daughter, like no one really knows the actual rules for this. And the whole point is you want to raise our kids so that they're economically independent.
Yep.
They're self-reliant and they can do their own thing. But, well, there's a list of 8 different categories, from transportation to education to food to things that you need to be purchasing. And so what we created is basically this framework from 12 to 16, 16 to 18, 18 to 22, and 22 and beyond to be like, all right, you know, mom, dad, we're going to fill this out. This is our bank charter. And the kid. So we all actually, so they're going to sign it. We're going to sign it. They know the rules. They know, hey, we'll split this with you, but this is on your own. Okay, when you're 18, this is on your own, but we'll do this. And it's a fun experience because what happens is, it aligns everyone. So there's no like, well, you know, otherwise she's just going to come to me or she's going to go to mom and see who gives her money.
When it feels good, like for you, like your kid coming to you and you saying yes, you feel like you're doing something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Of course,
like,
you want to give it to him. Like, you know, you're like,
that's the one. It's more ego for you than it is for the kid. It's like, I feel like I'm.
Well, so my daughter the other day, she goes to the movies. The movie's $10, but then she buys popcorn and candy. And I want to be very clear about my statement. Even today, when I go to the movies, I'm like, it's too expensive. I'm not buying popcorn and candy. Yeah. I know I can afford the popcorn and candy, but I'm like, it's a ripoff. So I like don't a lot. Like I'm cheap on the popcorn and candy. Maybe not the popcorn anymore, but like the candy or whatever. But my daughter, who's 14, is like, swipe the card. That's the worst behavior on the planet. But it's because I had sent her money for the movie. She was like, oh man, this is free. This is free. And so it's horrible behavior for her. But this process, it allows everyone to go through this experience so they're all on the same page. So the bank, mom and dad, are treating their customers, their kids, teaching them, hey, this are the rules of the bank.
Yeah.
And this is how it's going to happen when you're 16 with a car, right? Who's going to pay for gas? Who's paying for insurance? This is what it's expected of you. So they know, like, hey, when you're 18, these are the new rules. And now they at least can start to prepare for that rule.
Emotionally prep.
It's not catching them off guard that when they're 18, they're now on their own.
I've never heard that before, and I love it. And I need to take you and your wife to dinner because we're in that right now where we're trying to form our own philosophy on how to give and how to, it just feels like you're way further down the road than we are as far as answering these questions.
So this is, my wife grew up with life saying no, okay? What that means is if you don't have the income, then mom says no, period. Like that, then, hey, no, you don't get that thing. So Megan would just have to work. When you have money, it is tempting. It is easier to be like, and by the way, you don't have to be a Saudi prince money. It's just if you have the income to pay for the movie, you want to be like, well, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
Right? But when you do that, it's like, well, they're just going to the ATM. When the ATM gives them money, they're like, great, sweet.
Of course.
And I think we're doing our kids a disservice if at least there's not a structure and a framework to guide them to independence.
Yeah.
Because regardless if you're going to give them zero or if you're going to give them $1 billion or whatever, you need to teach them how to be independent. And that's kind of what you're talking about, the Saudi family. And so we have a lot of these little experiences. Again, there's no right way to do it, but there are best practices that we try to disclose and stories that we tell what other people are doing. And frankly, a lot of the stuff I'm like saying is not me. It's like, oh, I interviewed this guy out of Illinois that was telling me this story. And I'm like, oh, that's really smart. And right, I'm just regurgitating.
You're just taking the best and making it your own.
Yeah.
Which is like my philosophy on success. Like I think about my habits. Very few of my habits are my habits. It's identifying people that I look up to and aspire to be like and copying shamelessly. Like what you have, I really admire.
Yeah.
And I want that in my life. And there's a process that you got it. And I'm just going to steal that process and make it my own. And that's kind of what you're saying is obviously you innovate and you adapt, but for the most part it's saying there's people that have walked this road before. And I think ultimately that's probably why you wrote the book, is to help people fast track that process instead of have to reinvent the wheel.
Yes, I wrote the book for two reasons. Reason one is I saw what money did to my grandpa and to my family. By the way, I've had multiple cousins died of drug overdoses, go to jail. I had my aunt and uncle. I saw what money and entitlement and just handing it around did. Yep. And it was a disaster. And the lack of fulfillment and the infighting and all that stuff. And I want to help people avoid that. So that's the first reason. Go right, not left. Second thing is if you think about the needs in this world and who's going to solve them, I would argue that the governments across the world, doesn't matter what one, they're just inefficient at actually successfully helping out those in need.
Of course.
Countless examples. But capitalism is usually talked about in a world of making money and making money. But capitalism is also innovating the greatest solutions and providing value to the world at a scale of nothing we've never seen before. And so my passion is if I can get people like Casey who are in Casey's position or people that want to be like Casey, and I can help them build their own factory for good so they can start to produce and actually achieve good at a sustainable and scalable way as opposed to relying on a government entity. And so the smartest and brightest, minds out there can actually go and build, factories, factories for good that actually reach the end person, and they can use their brains and their business talent and their innovation to go do that. Then I'm like, then that's my life's mission. Let's go do that.
It feels like you've got to be so proud of kind of what you built and what you're going to build. Like it feels like it's completely mission driven. It feels like it's like getting all of you right now.
Yeah, so it feels like when I was called to do Divvy or whatever, right? When I did that.
You're on the front end of that journey.
Yeah, and my thing though is, it is really sad to me when someone works really hard and they climb Money Mountain and they make their money and then they kind of just sit on a beach or whatever you want to say.
Yep.
They kind of relax.
Yep.
I'm not saying they shouldn't have fun, right? Like they should do the things they want to do, but I want them to shift their focus to figuring out what their output for good is and to start to use their brain and their intellect and their energy and their connections and their opportunity to make a better world for either themselves, like their family, their friends, and what I call Circle C, which is the community at large.
Yeah.
And if I can do that in any small part, then let's go.
So
let's
cool.
go do it.
It goes back. I was referencing Tony Robbins, but when he talks about the ultimate failure, it's to go have success without fulfillment, to go get to the top of the mountain and be hollow and say, "Is this all there is?" And you know what I mean. And he talks about examples. You take people that have been very successful that commit suicide, or that they, from the outside looking in, everybody would look at them and say they did it, but they didn't capture.
But they didn't actually do it.
They didn't capture what
clearly they missed a missing puzzle piece.
They didn't capture what life's all about. And so I think it's coming back to it. If you're using that language right now, you're growing a lot. Like it's stretching you. Whether it's 50 different interviews with all these people, or the process of writing a book, the process of marketing a book, like that's work and it stretches you. But then evangelizing it and serving and like helping integrate it, like that's like something worth giving your life to. And I think it's so admirable. And when I see people that like have found it, I just, I admire that so much, because I think that's what life's all about. Is to go spend your life in a way that's you're doing good in the world, that you're making a contribution, that like you leave it better than you found it. And anyway, so I love what you're doing, love everything that you're about. Before we finish up, this is one that's important to me, and I like talking, to different people about it. But talk to me about your faith, and talk to me about faith factors in the whole journey. Whether it's business, whether it's family, all this. How does your faith fit?
Yeah, my faith fit. It's an interesting question. I mean, I grew up in a faith-filled family with good examples as parents and brothers. And so as a kid, I was always, I wanted to do it and it felt right. And we kept doing it. Served a mission.
But what is it?
What?
Like what is it when you say I want to do it? Like what is?
So you know what? Actually, going back to like, I saw the people in my family that didn't have a faith.
Yeah.
And they were alcoholics and drug addicts. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And it was like, oh, these are people that are like, going to church and they have a purpose that's above them, higher than them. And that's given them this sense of peace and this sense of contentment that I just really resonated with. And so as a kid, I kind of found myself going that direction. And I've stayed in that lane. And for me, there's two things I want to say. One is, for me, my faith has always been, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for me, reading the Book of Mormon specifically for me that is my life-changing book.
Yeah.
Because every time I read it, I feel a sense, I get insights, I feel purpose, I feel connected. I feel something that I don't feel doing anything else. And when it fits into business, I'll tell you this: when we started Divvy, how much it takes and how much energy in that process. We were praying, fasting, going to our temple a lot for the purpose of the business.
Yeah.
To like watch it grow and I feel like we had help along the way that we felt as we did it, and we felt buoyed up. And so now, when it came and success finally hit, it was one of those of like, all right, now it's my responsibility to actually receive with gratitude.
You feel like it's a stewardship.
I 100% feel like it's a stewardship. Yeah.
It's so special. Anyway, I love the Divvy story. But I'm more excited probably for the story post Divvy story. I'm excited to fast forward 5 or 10 years from now, and to come back and say, like, what has your factory for good churned out? What are what's the fruits? Like, what are the outcomes of you living this. And that's where, like, when you look down the road at the horizon, I just think you starting at this age with this philosophy and this map, you're going to make it down the world. And I'm excited to be a part of it and cheer for you and contribute, wherever I can. So,
well, thanks for having me. Love the conversation. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm going to try to keep climbing as, one step at a time and see where it goes. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.